I walked into the courthouse like it was a library, silent, purposeful, and heavy with consequence. My shoes clicked against the tile as I moved past the check-in desk, clutching a black leather binder stamped in gold. Truth. Not a file, not a weapon, just the truth, dressed for court. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about record, and records don't lie. Honora walked beside me, a steady presence dressed in soft blue. She didn't speak, and she didn't need to. Albina waited by the courtroom door, papers in hand, as composed as ever, the kind of woman who could end a dynasty with a footnote. Inside the waiting area, Bryna sat with her lawyer, pale, lips tight, tapping her foot so fast the chair trembled. Valmai sat across the room, stone-faced. Her shawl hung perfectly. Her hands didn't move, but her eyes, they wouldn't meet mine. I took my seat without hesitation. This wasn't their stage anymore. It was mine. The judge entered. We stood, swore in, sat. Albina stood first. Your Honor, today we present irrefutable evidence of coordinated financial misrepresentation, deed forgery, and deliberate exclusion from an estate by both Ms. Bryna Williams and Ms. Valmai Williams. She handed over a binder thicker than anything I'd ever written in school. Albina began, page by page, laying bare every transaction, every paper trail. The deed that had been rewritten. The account that had been drained. The emails exchanged where I was labeled emotionally unstable, manipulative, better cut off cleanly. Then she turned to me. Ms. Williams, do you wish to speak? I stood slowly, binder still in hand. Yes, Your Honor. I walked to the center of the courtroom, looked at the judge, then at Valmai, then at Bryna. For years, I was told to stay silent for the sake of peace. I was taught that questioning things made me difficult, that remembering too clearly made me disloyal. But that silence was used as cement to seal my erasure. Today, I refuse to be buried in courtesy. Albina nodded, opened her laptop, and connected it to the court's screen. I'd like to play a video, she said. The judge agreed. The footage began, grainy, casual. My father sitting on the porch, sun in his eyes, holding a cup of coffee. This house is for Tashia, he said, clear as a bell. She earned it. She saved me. Gasps echoed. I didn't flinch. Valmai turned her head sharply, as if she could look away from a voice that no longer needed her permission. Bryna's lawyer scribbled something fast. She crossed her arms. The judge looked up. We'll take a brief recess to deliberate. We exited in silence. Outside the courtroom, as I sipped from a water fountain, I heard a familiar voice. Tashia. I turned. Mary. My father's oldest friend. A retired notary. She reached into her handbag and pulled out an envelope, sealed, dated. I never meant to get involved, she whispered, but I kept this. He asked me to notarize it the month before the stroke. Inside, a letter, his handwriting. My intention is for Tashia to inherit 70% of the property. She is the only one who remained when I couldn't walk. Albina read it, stared at me. Can I submit this? I nodded. When we returned, Albina walked up to the bench and handed it over. Supplemental evidence, Your Honor. Valmai looked like her shawl might strangle her. Bryna clenched her jaw. They thought I came alone, I thought. But even memory has witnesses. The judge read the letter quietly, then looked up. In light of this document and the cumulative evidence provided, the court rules as follows. I held my breath. Financial restitution is ordered in full. Partial property rights awarded to Ms. Tashia Williams. The public record will be amended to reflect this ruling. All prior misrepresentations are to be removed from official documents. Valmai began to cry. But not like someone mourning a loss, more like someone cornered by light. Bryna stood before the ruling ended, walked out, not a glance in my direction. They taught me to fear being seen, I thought. I learned to fear being silenced. That night, I didn't go back to their house. I sat on the porch of my own home, the one I bought, the one they had nothing to do with. I replayed the video again, not for validation, but as a farewell. Honora arrived with tea. No words, just presence. I smiled, finally letting it settle into my bones. There are victories no court can grant, I said, and they're the only ones worth keeping. Inside, the lights were warm. My framed photo of nursing school still stood by the window. They'll keep rewriting the past, but this chapter ends with my signature. I stepped out of my car into the heat of a Flagstaff summer afternoon, the kind that pressed against your skin like unspoken tension. The house looked the same in shape, but not in spirit. The paint was newer, brighter. The lawn too perfect, as if scrubbed of any trace of who we used to be. I wasn't early or late, just strategically on time. I knew this wasn't an invitation. It was an obligation dressed up with RSVP instructions. Bryna's voice carried before I saw her. "Welcome, everyone. Please, drinks are inside." She was already surrounded by extended cousins and neighbors, her laugh loud and polished. She spotted me from across the porch and offered a small wave, more PR than personal. I responded with a nod, not a smile. Inside, everything gleamed. Hardwood, where there was once carpet, modern art, where old family photos used to hang. I noticed a blank wall where our father's faded marine photo had hung for 2 decades, replaced, just like the rest of it. "Hi. I'm sorry, are you one of Bryna's co-workers?" A woman in a pastel blouse asked as I reached for a seltzer. I blinked. "I'm her sister," I replied. She flushed, apologized awkwardly, and backed away. I sipped the drink and let the silence in my chest thicken. They redid the walls, the furniture, hell, even the stories. Every corner of the house had been curated to fit the new narrative. Bryna, the family savior. Me, a relic of an inconvenient truth. I followed the murmurs into the dining area, and that's when I saw it. A small round table near the swinging kitchen door. 3 place settings. A folded card read, "Tashia," in glitter pen, spelled wrong. Nearby, the children's table had actual centerpieces. Mine sat next to a trash bin and the scent of dishwater. A couple chuckled from behind me. "Oh, I thought she moved away." I picked up the card, heart steady. I scanned the room and quietly swapped it with one left unclaimed near the main table. Petty? Maybe. But so was erasing someone's name from their own history. Bryna approached with a glass of wine. "We weren't sure you'd make it. You usually avoid gatherings." I tilted my head. And yet, here I am. She smiled too tightly. "Well, feel free to mingle." I nodded and turned my attention to a nearby conversation, pretending not to hear her mutter as she walked away. "Don't make a scene." The meal was served, laughter rose, toasts began. Valmai stood. My mother looked polished, calm, like she was at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. "Thank you all for joining us. This home is a symbol of perseverance, dedication, and love, especially the tireless work of Bryna. She's carried so much of this journey." Applause. People nodded, lifted glasses. I waited for her to say my name. She didn't. I raised my voice slightly. "I helped pay the deposit that year." The room hushed like someone had cracked glass. Valmai's eyes narrowed. "You always find a way to make it about you," she said, her tone as cool as it was cruel. I didn't respond immediately. The air was brittle, like it would shatter if I breathed wrong. The moment passed, and chatter resumed awkwardly. Later, in the kitchen, I noticed her holding the keys, our father's old ring with the brass tag still on it. "Giving her the house?" I asked, voice even. "It's only fair," she said. "She's the one who stayed. I stayed when you broke your hip. I cleaned your bedpans. She posted filtered photos while I changed your dressings." Valmai turned sharply. "You don't understand what it means to build something." I took a step forward. "Then tell me why only her name is on the deed." Her jaw clenched. She didn't answer. Instead, she threw the keyring. It hit me on the cheekbone, sharp and sudden. A gasp from someone nearby. The room paused. She didn't move. Bryna stepped in, not to check on me, not to apologize. She leaned in, voice low. "This place isn't yours." I didn't cry. I touched my cheek, warm, swelling, not just from the metal, from everything they'd stripped from me in plain sight. I turned and walked through the sliding doors into the backyard, away from the manufactured laughter and carefully arranged sympathy. The swing was gone. The old tire one Dad had hung back in '98. All that remained was a flat patch of grass. Just like that, a piece of my childhood erased without ceremony. I sat on the stone edge of the flower bed and scrolled through my phone. A text from Honora blinked on screen. "You okay?" I stared at it. Typed, erased, typed again, then locked the screen. I couldn't explain what this was. Not yet. I listened to the buzz of conversation inside. Toasts resumed. Another speech. Bryna's voice called out, "To family!" I imagined them clinking glasses while my blood pulsed beneath fresh bruising. Through the glass, I saw Valmai smiling as if she hadn't thrown her daughter into the walls of her own home. I saw Bryna soaking up praise for a foundation I helped pour. I drove away slowly, the sun melting into the desert horizon. My fingers trembled, but my grip stayed firm. "You want me gone?" I said aloud, to no one. "You'll wish you hadn't thrown the only person who truly remembered this house out the front door." That was the day I stopped calling that place home. I stepped away from the living room as quietly as I could, holding a half-finished drink I no longer wanted. The voices behind me merged into a distant hum, as if the house itself was trying to muffle what had just happened. I didn't head for the front door. Instead, I slipped out the side patio door and let it click shut behind me. The evening light had softened, casting shadows on the neatly trimmed lawn. It was the kind of golden hour you'd expect in a family commercial. Except I was the extra they never cast. I walked past a few guests gathered around the fire pit. They looked up, paused mid-conversation, then continued like I wasn't there. One woman, Aunt Lila, I think, cut her eyes away so fast, I wondered if she thought ignoring me might erase me. The patio furniture was new, just like everything else. I took a seat at the edge, under the pergola draped with string lights. I caught my reflection in the sliding glass door, my eye, still red and slightly puffy from where the keys had landed. It wasn't dramatic, just obvious, like a scar still deciding whether it wants to stay permanent. This housewarming wasn't a celebration. It was a staging. And I was the unscripted guest, accidentally still in the scene. "Family is supposed to be your safe harbor," I whispered to myself, "not your first storm." I heard laughter from inside and decided to re-enter. I don't know why. Some part of me hoped someone would pull me aside and say, "That wasn't okay." But the truth is, in this family, silence isn't guilt. It's loyalty. I entered through the back, near the kitchen. Voices echoed from the dining area. "She's the reason I feel alive again," my mother's voice rang out. I paused. "I mean, Bryna has done so much for me," Valmai continued to someone I couldn't see. "She's really stepped up." "Isn't that your other daughter there?" the guest asked. Valmai didn't skip a beat. "Tasha, she didn't stay long when I needed help. Always had something else going on." My breath caught, not in surprise, but in confirmation, so that's how she tells it now. I walked in slowly, deliberately. Valmai saw me and gave a smile too polite to be anything but venom. She introduced me to her friend with a quick, "This is my older daughter." No names, no warmth. The woman gave me a nod. I nodded back, not trusting my voice yet. "I remember you helped when she had surgery," the woman said to me. Valmai chuckled. "She stopped by a few times. Bryna, though, she moved mountains." Bryna, who was out of town for 2 weeks of that recovery. Bryna, who posted selfies from the Bahamas while I was scrubbing commode chairs and changing bandages. "Bryna always thinks about others," Valmai added, pouring herself a drink. "Tasha's always been in her own world." I stared at her, hard. "You rewrite memories like they're captions on your Instagram," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Her smile faded. "Let's not do this here," she muttered. "Where would be more convenient?" I asked. "At your next performance?" She stepped away without responding. They weren't just rewriting history, they were deleting me from it. I wandered into the hallway leading to the bedrooms. That's when I saw the wall. Once filled with cluttered, mismatched frames from over the years, the gallery had been redesigned, sleek, uniform frames in black and white. The photos inside, all pristine, Brina and Valmai in Paris, Brina at a charity run, a family reunion, except I wasn't in any of them, not one. I scanned left to right, top to bottom. A small, old photo caught my eye, one from when I was maybe 10. I was on the edge of the frame, half-shadowed, cut off, a cropped-out child. Not a meltdown, not even a tear. Just a sharp breath I didn't realize I was holding, a quiet collapse from the inside out. "You don't have to scream to be erased," I murmured. "All it takes is for no one to frame you." Footsteps came from behind. My cousin Erica glanced at me, then at the wall. She opened her mouth, then shut it, and walked away. Text pinged. "Honora again. You still there? Need a ride?" I typed, "No," then deleted it. Leaving in silence felt too easy, too polite. I stood there a little longer, tracing the edge of the frame where my face used to be, where I should have been. "They think I'm not watching," I whispered. "They'll learn I never forget." Dessert time rolled in like a performance. Brina's laughter rang from the kitchen, sharp, perfect, rehearsed. Applause followed. Someone must have made another toast. I didn't care to know what for. I stayed by the hallway, the one place in this house untouched by their renovations. It still smelled faintly of dust and lemon polish, like it remembered who used to walk through it barefoot on Saturday mornings. I leaned closer to one frame, not out of nostalgia, but observation. The paint on the wall behind it was uneven, revealing the outline of an older photo that had once hung there, probably one of me and Dad. I reached out and touched it. "They built a new story," I said, "but they forgot who poured the foundation." I let my hand fall. The party roared on behind me. It wasn't just a wall of memories, it was a battlefield, and they'd just fired the first real shot. I didn't turn on the lights when I got home. The soft blue glow of the microwave clock lit the kitchen just enough. I set my purse on the counter, my keys beside it, and stood for a long moment listening to the low hum of the fridge. My apartment felt smaller tonight, not in size, but in safety. It was the only space that hadn't been touched by revision, and somehow, even that felt temporary now. In the hallway mirror, the bruise on my cheek had darkened. The outline of the keys was no longer visible, but my skin told the story anyway. I leaned in, tilted my head, and stared at the woman in the reflection. I wasn't sad. I was tired. Tired of being expected to take hits and smile. Tired of watching people rearrange the truth and call it moving on. I walked to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, still fully dressed. Kicking off my shoes, I leaned over and reached under the bed for the shoebox I hadn't opened in months. It was heavier than I remembered, but that might have just been me. Inside were photos, letters, a couple of cards from birthdays that hadn't made it onto Facebook walls. I pulled out a yellowing envelope with my name in Valmai's cursive, a thank you note. "You always come through for me," she'd written in blue ink, the tail of the Y in U looping confidently into the margin. That was 2 years ago. I could still smell the antiseptic from her recovery room, still feel the weight of her body as I helped her bathe. Brina was too busy with work, but I was there. I cleaned her sheets when she couldn't hold it, spoon-fed her soup, rubbed lotion into bruised legs she pretended not to feel. For weeks, I became invisible so she wouldn't feel ashamed. And at that party tonight, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "I don't recall that. Must have been something minor. Minor." A woman forgets the hands that held her when she was too weak to stand, but remembers the daughter who brought her wine and storybook applause. It's crueler to pretend it never mattered than to admit you forgot. I placed the card on my nightstand and opened my laptop. I hadn't looked at my bank history in a while, mostly because I knew it would remind me of everything I gave and how little I ever asked for in return. Scrolling through the transaction list, one entry stood out. Restoration loan, Dad's Pontiac. A bitter laugh caught in my throat. I remembered the exact day he handed me the keys. I was 18, wearing a graduation gown that didn't quite fit. He jingled the keys, said, "Take care of her. She's yours." After he died, I parked the car in storage. I couldn't bring myself to drive it, but I paid for the space every month. Last year, Valmai called saying it needed repairs. I wired the money. She said we'd talk later. There was no later. A few weeks back, a cousin casually mentioned seeing the car listed on Facebook Marketplace. Sold. Gone. I didn't yell, didn't confront. Just filed it away with the rest of the betrayals dressed up as decisions made for the family. I opened a manila folder from the box and pulled out a photo. Dad and me, standing beside the Pontiac. He had his arm around my shoulder, and I was grinning like I'd just won the lottery. That car wasn't about metal or horsepower, it was about memory, and they'd traded it in like scrap. When someone sells your memory, it means they already moved on from you. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I simply slid the photo back into its sleeve, returned it to the box, and closed the lid. Grabbing my journal from the nightstand, I opened to a blank page and wrote a title at the top in capital letters. Who they think I am. Who I really am. Beneath it, I began listing facts, simple truths no one seemed to remember. I kept the house running when Mom was in surgery. I gave up a job interview to care for her. I paid for half the first round of renovations. I bought the groceries the month Bryna forgot her wallet. I cleaned after everyone left the hospital, no embellishment, no emotion, just receipts in sentence form. They want to make me small. But small people don't carry families on their back and get erased for it. I flipped to the next page. On the top, I wrote 3 words. What comes next? The answer came before the ink dried. Albina. I hadn't talked to her in months, not since she left the firm to open her own practice. But she always said, "Paper is patient. It waits for you to use it." Maybe it was time I used mine. I placed the envelope of photos on the table beside my keys, picked up the key ring, turned it slowly in my hand. The same keys Valmai had thrown at me, now just cold metal, useless for the doors they no longer opened, but still capable of unlocking something else entirely. They threw me the keys to nothing, but I still hold the map. I opened my phone and scrolled to Albina's contact. My thumb hovered over the call button. If they're rewriting the past, I'll bring receipts for every page they forgot. 2 days after the housewarming, I got a text from Valmai. Just 4 words. Brunch Sunday. You're welcome. No apology. No acknowledgement of the key-shaped bruise she left on my face. Just a thin, calculated invitation wrapped in the illusion of civility. I stared at the screen longer than I care to admit. Honora called not 5 minutes later, like she felt it happen. "You're not going," she said flatly. "I'm considering it," I replied. "Why? So they can insult you over waffles this time?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said what I'd already decided. "Sometimes the battlefield is exactly where you need to stand still." She exhaled. "Just promise you'll walk out if it turns into a circus." "I'm not making a scene," I told her. "I'm just going to listen." She knew better than to argue. That morning, I dressed with the precision of a soldier, neutral makeup, black slacks, a button-down that didn't beg for attention, but didn't blend into the walls either. I wanted no excuses, no distractions. I wanted to be seen for exactly who I was, someone they hadn't erased yet. When I arrived, Bryna answered the door like she was hosting a charity luncheon. She gave me a too-wide smile and chirped, "So glad you came." Inside, the kitchen smelled of freshly baked scones and polished ambition. The table was perfectly set. Mimosas already poured. I counted at least 3 different kinds of quiche. Distant cousins I barely recognized nodded politely. Bryna launched into a tour like it was a real estate showing. "This is the sunroom," added for Mom's recovery. I picked the tile myself. One woman gasped, "You have such an eye." "And here's the kitchen," she continued, gesturing like a Price is Right model. "We knocked down this wall for better accessibility." Valmai stood beside her, nodding solemnly like a political spouse. "Bryna coordinated every step," she said. "I wouldn't have made it through without her." I stood in the hallway, arms folded, watching the show unfold. My presence was acknowledged only in the way a breeze shifts a curtain. Noticed, but not valued. In the dining room, A framed invoice sat on a sideboard. It listed renovation costs, neatly formatted and color-coded. I recognized the contractor name. It was the same one I'd recommended and paid a deposit to. I stepped closer. That invoice, part of that was my loan, I said calmly. Valmai didn't miss a beat. You gave what you could, she said, her voice syrupy. Bryna gave everything. I looked her in the eye. You mean she gave what you decided to remember? There was a beat of silence. Then Bryna clapped her hands. Let's eat. They moved on. I didn't. During the meal, a cousin asked about my work. I answered honestly, freelancing again, building up slowly, taking fewer clients but more fulfilling ones. Valmai interrupted with a tight smile. Tashia's always had a heavier energy. I'm glad Bryna brings such light to the house. The table chuckled nervously, like a laugh track triggered out of obligation. Bryna leaned forward, placing a manicured hand on the table. We've all tried to include her, she said sweetly, but you know how some people are. My fork paused midair. I looked at them, all of them, eating quiche off the back of my contributions and laughing at the weight they helped place on my shoulders. They weren't just erasing my past. They were branding me as a burden in their present. I remembered when Dad used to call me his quiet spark, the kid who lit rooms without shouting. Now, according to them, I was too heavy for the walls to hold. After the plates were cleared, I excused myself and walked back into the kitchen. A stack of mail sat near the back door. On top, an envelope with my name, crossed out in ink, replaced with Bryna's. I stared at it, then picked it up. Valmai appeared behind me. That's nothing important. It was for me. She hesitated, then said, Don't read into everything, dear. I held up the envelope. I don't have to read into it. The message is printed in black ink. She shrugged, smiled politely, and walked away. And I stood there, holding proof that they didn't forget me. They removed me. They needed me to be the shadow so Bryna could be the light. If they need to cast me as the storm so they can feel like sunlight, let them. I'll bring the thunder next. I left the kitchen, grabbed my bag, and walked toward the front door. Valmai intercepted me with a glass of water in one hand and a too-soft voice. Try not to take things so personally, dear, she whispered, like I was the unreasonable one for seeing the truth. I didn't respond. I stepped outside into the quiet sunlight. In the car, I pulled out my phone, scrolled through contacts. Albina, one tap away. I didn't press call, but I didn't delete the number either. If they were going to revise the story, they'd better be ready for the sequel I was about to publish. I didn't text. I didn't call. I drove straight to the house, pulled into the driveway like I hadn't been made a stranger to it. The gravel crunched under my tires, a sound so familiar it almost hurt. I hesitated a moment before getting out, just long enough to remember how many times I'd helped carry groceries up those same steps. Valmai opened the door, eyebrows raised in surprise. Her voice came sharp and clipped, like the beginning of a lecture. Did you text first? I didn't think I needed to, I replied calmly. I used to live here. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound followed. She stepped aside, letting me in without comment. I came to get a few things, some books from the attic, a box of photos. She blinked at that but nodded. Fine, don't take long. I moved through the hallway with quiet steps, noting how the light fixtures had changed again. Everything in this house seemed to evolve except the way they treated the truth. At the top of the stairs, I paused. The air smelled like lavender and eucalyptus. New candles, no doubt Bryna's doing. I opened the door to what used to be my room, and stopped. Gone was the twin bed with the creaky frame. Gone was the bookshelf I'd built from a kit in college, the desk where I wrote every college essay, where I cried the night I didn't get into my first-choice grad school. Gone. In its place stood an island of mirrored cabinetry, racks of high-end clothes, and neatly lined shoes, rows of them, color-coded, labeled. The far wall was now painted a soft champagne gold, covering the faint pencil marks where I had once recorded my height each birthday. Guess the room had better uses, I murmured. Bryna's voice floated in from behind me. We didn't throw anything away. We just made better use of the space. She was towel-drying her hair, stepping barefoot into her designer lounge. I turned to face her. "And where did my things go?" Valmai appeared then, arms crossed. "We figured you didn't need any of it anymore." My chest tightened. "You figured." There was a pause, a comfortable silence for them, a suffocating one for me. "That room wasn't just wood and drywall," I said, voice low. "It held me together once." Neither of them responded. Bryna busied herself with a bottle of face mist. Valmai turned and walked away. I walked out without another word, but not before noticing a chipped music box on a small table in the hallway, something my late aunt had given me when I was a child. It was dusty, but intact. I picked it up, brushed off the surface. "That's not yours anymore," Valmai called from the bottom of the stairs. "It was never yours," I answered, holding it in my hands. She moved closer, her voice tighter now. "You really need to let go. Why must you keep dragging things up?" "Because you keep burying things you're not done killing," I said. Bryna stepped into the hallway, arms folded. "Let's not do this again." My eyes locked with hers. "I've never done this. You just keep doing it louder." It didn't escalate. It didn't need to. The silence afterward held more weight than any shouting match could. I turned, walked down the stairs, out the door. No one tried to stop me. I made it to my car and placed the music box in the passenger seat. My hand shook, not from fear, but from a rage I had buried under years of trying to keep the peace. It wasn't about one room. It was about the deliberate way they made sure I had no place left to return to. The house, once my anchor, was now just an address where someone else's version of events lived. As I drove away, I didn't look in the rearview mirror for long. But just before the road turned, I caught one last glimpse of the window that used to belong to me. Now it just belonged to the story they'd told enough times to make themselves believe it. My phone rang. Honora's name lit up the screen. "You okay?" she asked as soon as I answered. I didn't reply right away. Then, "I think I'm finally tired of being okay." There was no reply, just a long breath. Then her voice, soft but steady. "About time." I pulled over into a quiet park. The wind rustled the leaves like they had a secret to share. I opened the music box and let it play. The tune was cracked, uneven, just like everything else, but it still played. If they've emptied my room, I'll rebuild my story, brick by brutal brick. The law office smelled like filtered air and stale coffee, that particular brand of quiet where no one cried, but a lot of lives changed. I didn't have an appointment, but Albina had told me long ago, "My door is open when you're done being shocked and ready to be smart." I was there now. The man at the front desk barely glanced up before nodding and pressing a button. A soft click echoed as the frosted glass door opened. I stepped through and saw Albina already waiting. She looked up from a legal pad, set her pen down without rushing. "Come in." I handed her the folder. No pleasantries, no preamble. Inside were screenshots, wire confirmations, and a printout of the deed Valmai once promised I'd be on. Albina opened the folder and flipped through each page carefully. "You want me to walk you through what's here, or do you already know?" "I know," I said. "I just want someone to say it out loud." She nodded once. "You contributed $30,000 to a property that you have zero legal claim to." "Correct." She turned to her computer and within moments had the county assessor's site up. "Here's the current title," she said, pointing. "Valmai and Bryna, no mention of you." I didn't flinch. I'd seen it before. Albina looked at me. "Did they tell you you'd be added later?" "Yes, on a phone call. Mom said, 'Don't worry, we'll add you after the paperwork is settled.'" Albina's eyes narrowed. "That's not how deeds work." I laughed softly. "You think they cared?" She leaned back. "This wasn't negligence. This was strategic. You were never part of the plan, just the budget." The words hit like a slap, even though I already knew them. It's different hearing it from someone who doesn't owe you kindness. Albina reached for another folder. "There's something else," she said. "I started pulling associated filings when I saw your name wasn't listed." This came up. She placed a document in front of me. "Quitclaim deed, filed 3 months ago. It states that you voluntarily waived your rights to any claim on the property." I blinked. That's not possible. She raised an eyebrow. It has your signature. I leaned in. It looked like my name. The loops and slant, almost perfect, but not quite. That's not mine, I said. I didn't sign this. Albina zoomed in on her screen. See here? She pointed at the pixel edges. That's a copy-paste job. Someone lifted your name from another document and placed it here. I stared at it. They didn't just erase me. They forged my silence. Albina said nothing for a moment. Then she reached for a clean intake form and slid it across the desk. You have a case. It's strong. The paper trail favors you. Are you ready to file? I hesitated, not because I doubted, but because this wasn't just legal anymore. It was emotional. Historical. A lifetime of being edged out, dressed up in fine print. I looked down at the form, picked up the pen. 2 years ago, I transferred funds while Bryna said, "You know Mom needs this. We'll make it fair later." Fair. That word still stuck in my throat like a bone. They didn't want fair. They wanted convenient. I signed the form. Albina stamped it, like sealing a truth long overdue. As I walked out, I passed a bulletin board in the hallway. Dozens of smiling clients, arms around Albina, holding manila folders or court summaries. The kind of justice that takes time, but lands like a gavel. I turned back. How long does a case like this usually take? Albina didn't hesitate. Long enough to show them you're not someone to cross again. Outside, the sun was unforgiving. I stepped into the heat and didn't blink. They used my name without my permission. Now they'll remember it in court documents. The email came on a Wednesday morning, dressed in bright colors and hollow warmth. Subject line, Family Unity Night. Let's heal together. It felt like an inside joke I wasn't in on. And yet, I read it 3 times. The body of the message was just as rehearsed. Dinner in the backyard. Just good food, soft music, and even softer hearts. Signed, of course, by Bryna. I could practically smell the lavender-scented passive aggression through the screen. I forwarded it to Honora without comment. Her reply came almost immediately. Don't. But I was already pressing yes on the RSVP. I arrived just after 7, dressed in a navy blouse and jeans that didn't try too hard. The house looked like a magazine cover, lanterns strung across the patio, candles flickering along the walkway, and enough vanilla and sandalwood in the air to mask any stench of guilt. Inside, everything glowed, but nothing felt warm. Bryna greeted me at the gate with a smile so wide I could see every molar. "Violet, you made it!" she said, arms outstretched like we hadn't spoken through lawyers just days ago. "Would have hated to miss the healing," I replied. Inside, the backyard buzzed with small talk and curated playlists. Valmai stood near the buffet table, holding a wine glass like it was a microphone she could use at any moment. Her eyes landed on me but didn't linger. A few cousins waved, unsure whether I was a guest or a threat. Dinner was served buffet style. I took a small plate of pasta and sat alone at the far end of a table. Bryna floated around like a socialite, offering napkins and compliments. Then came the toast. She clinked her glass. "Thank you all for coming. This family has been through so much, but I believe forgiveness is the real power." Polite applause, then the dagger. Especially when some people choose to walk away rather than grow. A pause, a hum of knowing laughter. I didn't move. One cousin leaned in to another. "She always was. A little intense." And then Valmai added her layer. "Tashia's always felt different. She's more complicated." It felt rehearsed. Because it was. I thought back to 2 weeks ago, Bryna crying into the phone with our Aunt Clara. "I just don't know how to reach her. I try so hard." I thought she was breaking down. Turns out, she was practicing her lines. I placed my fork down. "I wasn't the one who walked away," I said, voice clear but calm. "You all walked around me." Bryna's face didn't change. Valmai sighed. "Let's not start another scene," she said, sipping her wine like she hadn't helped script the entire thing. They weren't defending themselves. They were staging my downfall. After dinner, I slipped inside to use the bathroom. On my way back, I heard small footsteps. My nephew, Bryna's son, peeked from around the hallway corner. "Aunt Tasha," he whispered. I knelt. "Hey, kiddo." He rushed into my arms, hugging tight. "I miss you." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I kept my tone steady. "I miss you too." Bryna appeared almost instantly. "Let's not confuse the children," she said, her voice ice over sugar. Valmai stepped in behind her. "It's better for everyone if boundaries are clear." They weren't just removing me, they were rebranding me as unsafe, unstable, unwelcome. I gently pulled away from my nephew. "Go back to your mom, sweetie," I said softly. He looked confused, but obeyed. As he walked off, I stood. "You didn't just push me out," I said. "You put up a sign that reads danger." Valmai didn't blink. Bryna offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We're just doing what's best for him." "For him?" I scoffed. "Or for your narrative?" They didn't answer. They didn't need to. The silence was louder than their lies. Dessert was served. Cupcakes with glittery frosting and a candle in the center that read family. Everyone clapped. Bryna bowed like she'd just ended a Broadway act. I sat at the edge of the table, watching every smile land like a slap. I stood quietly. No tantrum, no speech, just the sound of my chair sliding back. Someone asked, "You okay, Tasha?" "I didn't lose my voice," I said. "I gave you silence to make room for thunder." No one followed me out. Back in my car, I opened my phone and scrolled through photos from 2 years ago. Me feeding Mom soup, me holding her hand post-surgery, me cleaning the messes no one ever acknowledged. None of those moments had made it to the family slideshow, but they were real, and they were mine. I opened a new message to Albina, ready to move forward. If they want to paint me as the storm, I'll make sure their lies don't survive the first strike. The invitation came as a group message, curated to sound warm but hollow in every word. "Family circle meeting. Let's talk, reconnect, and realign. Light snacks and heavy hearts, welcome." The signature was unmistakably Valmai's. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My silence had started speaking more clearly than anything I'd ever said. 2 days later, I showed up with a purpose, not to reconcile, but to reveal. The living room looked like it had been staged for a documentary. Candles flickered on the mantel. Bryna had set out a charcuterie board so elaborate it could have catered a wedding. Pillows had been fluffed. Fake warmth filled the space like a smoke machine before a magic act. Valmai, seated in the center of the couch like a queen during court, smiled at me like we were meeting for the first time. "I'm glad you came, sweetheart," she said with her best diplomatic tone. "We just want to clear the air." "No need to clear it," I said, setting my bag gently on the chair beside me. "Just need it to be still long enough for the truth to settle." Honora sat quietly in the corner, legal pad on her lap. No expressions, just a quiet observer. Her presence alone steadied me. We hadn't even started the so-called discussion when Bryna stood, a gift bag in hand. "I wanted to begin with something special," she said. "For Mom." Out came a charm bracelet, silver, glinting with tiny pendants shaped like a teacup, a high heel, a little house, each symbol supposedly connected to a memory. "I ordered it months ago," Bryna said, her voice breaking just enough to seem unrehearsed. "Just a reminder of everything you've meant to us." Valmai's hands flew to her chest like a trained reflex. "You always remember the little things," she said, her eyes welling. The room clapped like an audience in a sitcom studio. And that's when I opened my phone. "Are you sure she bought it?" I asked, loud enough for the clapping to stop. Valmai blinked. "What?" I stood, holding up the screen. "Because I did. Ordered it on June 7th, paid in full, delivered here. I have the confirmation email, the shipping receipt, and even the customer service email where I requested the house charm to be engraved with legacy." The room froze. Bryna's mouth opened, but no sound came. "They clapped for a gift I gave," I said, locking eyes with her. "That wasn't the betrayal. The betrayal was that none of you ever expected I'd remember." Valmai looked between us, confused. Then she frowned. Why are you doing this? Because pretending has gone on long enough, I said. The shift in the room was palpable. Even Honora leaned slightly forward. Bryna, cornered but still trying to save face, muttered, "Well, maybe we both had the idea. It's not about who paid for what, it's the sentiment." "Then why remove my card from the bag?" I interrupted. No answer. Valmai, visibly uncomfortable now, shifted in her seat. "Let's not get sidetracked." "Sure," I said, unzipping my bag. "Let's not." I pulled out the old iPad, black, scratched, and forgotten by Valmai long ago. She had moved on to a newer model years back, but this one had stayed buried in a drawer at her place until I found it during a visit. She never reset it, never even locked it. I turned it on and opened the Messages app. "What is that?" Valmai asked, her voice tightening. "Just some old messages," I said. "On your account, between you and Bryna." I scrolled and then read aloud. "If she refuses to give more, we cut her out completely." Silence. "She'll cry for a bit, then fade out. Tashia's always been replaceable." Gasps. Real ones this time, not the staged kind. Valmai's hand rose, trembling. "That was taken out of context." "No," I said. "Context doesn't fix contempt." Bryna stood. "This is ridiculous." "No, what's ridiculous," I replied, "is that you built a story about me being unstable, ungrateful, dramatic, when all I ever did was show up, clean up, and get written out." Bryna stormed out without another word. Valmai sank back into the couch. Honora finally spoke. "That wasn't just a receipt," she said, looking at me. "That was a reckoning." The meeting didn't continue. There was nothing left to align. I didn't gloat. I packed my things slowly, deliberately. I'd brought facts, not a fight, and the truth did its work. As I turned to leave, one cousin approached me near the door. "Tasha," she said gently. "I didn't know. I'm sorry." I nodded. "Now you do. Now they all do." Driving home, I passed the tree near the old gas station, still bearing the carved initials my father helped me inscribe at 12T+M, Tashia plus memory. No one had painted over that. My phone buzzed. Albina, ready for next step. They gave me nothing but lies, and I turned them into affidavits. The next morning felt heavier than most, not because of the clouds hanging over Flagstaff or the lingering headache from too many conversations left unfinished, but because of the silence. The group chat had been renamed. I wasn't in it. No one called, no one texted, not even the distant cousins who used to send me birthday memes and baby photos of their dogs. Silence had become their strategy. Exile, the reward for being right out loud. I stood at my kitchen counter, staring at a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. I wasn't planning to stir the pot today. Just retrieve a few of my documents from the garage. Old tax forms, some birth certificates, a folder labeled Property, Dad. I'd left them at the house back when I was still naive enough to think that home meant permanence. I slipped the file tote bag over my shoulder, checked my phone one more time for no reason, then drove toward what used to be mine. The garage door was slightly ajar, enough to let in the morning light. I stepped inside carefully, not wanting to trigger any new drama. The familiar mustiness hit me first. Dust, old paint, and something metallic. I walked toward the filing cabinet, its bottom drawer still labeled in my handwriting. That's when I saw it. Near the shredder, wedged between flattened cardboard and a garbage bag, was a half-burned piece of paper. The edges were singed, curling like petals of a dead flower. I bent down and gently unfolded what remained. My name stared back at me. Tasha Williams, beneficiary of 30% of the estate, including rights to the Pontiac, a sum of savings from Dad's veteran pension, and a note in scrawled handwriting. "This part is for you, no one else." My breath caught, not in sorrow, not even in rage, but in recognition. This wasn't just paperwork. This was memory, a promise, a piece of my father that someone had tried to burn into non-existence. Albina's version of the will, officially updated, notarized last year, had no mention of me. I was a ghost in that document, like I'd never existed. But this was before the rewrite, before the adjustments. I slid the paper into my folder gently, careful not to rip what was left. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the realization that Betrayal had fingerprints, and they smelled like smoke. I stood to go inside, but when I pulled out my key, it didn't fit. Confused, I tried again. Nothing. I stepped up to the front door, knocked lightly. No answer. Rang the bell. Still nothing. Then a voice came from the yard next door. Mr. Halberd, our neighbor of 15 years. They changed the locks last night, he said, watering his azaleas. Said it was a safety concern. That word. Safety. It hit like a slap. It was the same justification they'd used when they banned me from seeing my nephew. The same word Bryna had whispered to justify cutting ties, as if I were dangerous, not inconvenient. I nodded at Mr. Halberd. Thanks for the heads up. Didn't think it was right, he added, looking uncomfortable. But they seemed firm. I smiled politely and walked back to my car, folder pressed tightly against my chest. It's one thing to be pushed out, it's another to realize they prepared for your return and planned to prevent it. I sat behind the wheel, watching the house like a museum exhibit of my own erasure. Then I pulled out my phone, opened the voice memo app, and hit record. Sunday, 9:48 a.m. Attempted entry to retrieve personal legal documents. Door locks changed. No prior notice given. Neighbor confirms change occurred last night under safety concerns. I paused, looked at the charred will again. Recovered partial original will with named inheritance. Will show to counsel for verification. This wasn't for vengeance. This was documentation. They erased me on paper, but paper can burn, memory doesn't. When I got back to my apartment, the light had shifted. Longer shadows against the floorboards. I set the torn will beside the court paperwork in the fireproof box I kept under the bed. I took a breath, long and deep, the kind you take before signing something permanent. Then I dialed. Albina answered on the second ring. Tasha? It's time, I said. Let's file the full complaint. She didn't ask why. She already knew. We'll serve them this week. I looked at myself in the mirror above my sink. For the first time in weeks, my reflection didn't blur. They changed the locks, but the law still has the master key. The community hall wasn't fancy, but it didn't need to be. Neutral beige walls, brown folding chairs, and a faint scent of lemon-scented floor polish. Albina had picked the place on purpose. Public enough to stay civil, private enough to get uncomfortable. I arrived early, just before 4, carrying a small gray file box that clicked gently with every step I took. It wasn't a show of force, it was precision. Every page inside had a purpose. They turned me into a story, I whispered to myself, looking around the empty room. Now I bring chapters they forgot to edit. Albina greeted me at the front with a clipboard in hand. Her calm energy felt like armor. Truth doesn't shout, she said. It builds cases. The others trickled in slowly. Bryna entered first, flanked by her lawyer, an uptight man in a navy suit who scanned the room like it owed him something. She wouldn't meet my eye. Valmai followed, wearing a shawl that screamed respectability and a perfume I hadn't smelled since I was 14. She gave me a tight-lipped nod, then took a seat near the center. The mediator gave a brief, rehearsed intro about intention, clarity, and mutual understanding. I waited for Bryna to pounce. She didn't disappoint. I think before we begin, we should acknowledge that not everyone here has a record of being financially reliable, she said, her voice syrupy. There were situations in college, loans not repaid, irresponsibility that's impacted trust. I didn't flinch. I stood, opened my file box, and pulled out a laminated spreadsheet. I anticipated this, I said, walking it to the mediator and Bryna's attorney. Here's every tuition payment I made from 2008 to 2012, line by line, receipts attached. I turned toward Bryna. And while we're on the topic of money, here's the Venmo record from 2019. I paid your rent when your firm cut bonuses. You said you'd pay me back. I handed over the printout. The silence grew loud. You turned my silence into debt, I said quietly. I turned my records into defense. Honora sat in the back, nodding slowly, arms folded. It was the smallest show of support, but it meant everything. Bryna's lawyer whispered something. She didn't respond. Valmai, arms crossed, avoided my gaze. Albina cleared her throat. Now, onto the matter of financial mismanagement, she said, sliding a different folder toward the mediator. My client contributed $10,000 into a joint emergency account with her mother. That account was closed without her knowledge, and a new one was opened, with her sister as co-owner. The mediator's eyebrows lifted. Albina continued. Here's the statement showing the closure date, 48 hours after the last deposit, and the opening of the replacement account, both within a week. Valmai's lawyer started to object, but she raised a hand. I thought she'd moved on from the family, Valmai said coolly. I leaned forward. You didn't think that when you took my money. There it was. Stillness again, but not the kind that healed. Albina tapped the table with her pen. This isn't simply about miscommunication. This is a pattern. It qualifies as financial coercion, and it won't sit quietly anymore. The mediator made a note. I stood and faced them both. I wanted reconciliation, I said. You wanted revision. I let the words settle before continuing. You taught me that silence was a form of respect. But I learned something different. Silence without justice? That's just fuel for someone else's comfort. I slid one final envelope across the table. These are my final documents, dated, signed, cross-referenced. This isn't a cry for attention. It's a declaration. Valmai's eyes narrowed. Bryna crossed her arms tighter. I finished with a whisper I knew they'd hear. My father once told me, paper can burn. But signed paper talks in court. The meeting wrapped. The mediator summarized, asked if both parties understood the terms of initial review. Bryna's legal team huddled in panic. Valmai walked out first, her face unreadable. Albina turned to me as we packed up. This is far from over, she said, but today we turned the volume back to truth. I sat in my car afterward, staring at the signed summary in my lap. I snapped a photo of it, not for proof, but for peace. They wanted to bankrupt me emotionally. Turns out they couldn't afford the truth. The smell hit me before the memories did. Waxed floors, copier toner, old paper. I hadn't been inside the Flagstaff Community Center in over a decade, but it still held the same quiet rhythm. New staff ran the place now, and none of them recognized me when I walked in. That was fine. I didn't come for recognition. I came for roots. I made my way past the bulletin boards, still plastered with announcements for parenting classes, free tax help, and potluck flyers. A child ran past, chasing another with laughter so loud it made me stop. They erased me from their world, I thought. I came here to remember who I was before they started editing. I found the sign-up sheet near the front desk. Under volunteer interests, I checked off literacy tutoring, meal service, and program admin. Quiet, practical boxes, just like me, just like I'd always been before they painted me as too much and never enough. By the time I got home, the sun had begun its descent behind the rooftops. I kicked off my shoes and sat on the floor in front of the TV stand, digging through the USB drives I kept tucked away. I finally found the one I was looking for, labeled Mom Video Final, a file I hadn't opened since the housewarming. I clicked play. Photos faded in and out. Me holding Mom's hand in the hospital, helping her walk down the hallway in her clunky post-surgery boot. Dad, smiling behind the camera, narrating quietly, "She takes after you, stubborn and strong." Then the voiceover came, my own voice, recorded late one night, too tired to be polished, but too full to stay quiet. "This house holds us because we built it together," I had said. Brick by brick, moment by moment, forgiveness and failure, and showing up when no one else did. I remembered how proud I'd been of the video, how much it meant, how I'd watched Bryna cue it up during the party, only to see it glitch and stop halfway through. Technical error, they said. But watching it now, start to finish, with perfect clarity, I knew better. It hadn't been a glitch. It had been a decision. They didn't want the memory. They wanted a montage without me. The ache didn't surprise me, but it stung deeper this time, because even my attempts at kindness had been deemed unworthy of their narrative. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it to find Valmai, holding a casserole dish covered in foil and a forced smile that strained her face. Thought we could talk, she said, lifting the dish like it might buy her forgiveness. I stepped aside. You want to talk? Let's talk. We sat on the couch, the dish untouched between us. I wanted to clear the air, she began. You mean rewrite it again? She flinched. I'm sorry you felt hurt. I stared at her. That's not an apology. That's a statement of inconvenience. Valmai exhaled. We didn't mean to make you feel excluded. I leaned forward. You meant to make me disappear. You just didn't think I'd speak up after. Silence. I waited for more, but she had nothing else. Just the dish. Just the pretend peace offering. She looked around the apartment, her eyes landing on the framed photo on my bookshelf. Me, in my nursing school uniform, arms around Dad. She said nothing. I didn't offer forgiveness. I offered truth. You weaponized absence. You turned my silence into permission. But I was never blind, Mom. Just patient. She blinked fast. I didn't know what else to do. You could have started by not lying. That ended the conversation. She stood, awkwardly adjusting her shawl. I'll leave this, she said, gesturing to the casserole. I didn't reply. When the door clicked shut, I sat for a long time. Then I opened my journal. On a fresh page, I wrote the title, Truths I Keep Even If They Don't. First line, I am not the angry one. I am the one who remembered. I turned back to the USB, took the original script I had written for the tribute video, and walked it to the kitchen. I lit a match, held the paper to the flame, let it burn slowly over the sink. Not in rage, in release. Sometimes peace doesn't look like a handshake. It looks like an empty seat at a table you don't want to return to. That night, I called Honora. There's a retreat next weekend, I said. On identity and boundaries. Want to come? You don't even have to ask, she replied. I'll drive. I walked by my desk on the way to bed, paused in front of the nursing school photo. For years, I had kept it in a drawer. Now it stood front and center, framed and lit by the lamp. My phone buzzed. Albina, discovery phase moving forward. Good. If I'm not welcome at their table, I'll build one that seats only the truth.